when somebody has an addiction,
Yes.
they have to want the help,
Yes. Mm-hmm.
because it's a lot of work to get better, just like it is with a mental illness. Even
Yes.
for me, to be okay, I have to accept. In fact, I had to reach a point of total acceptance, because I have gone through where I'm taking meds and then I'm like, I feel good, I'm fine, like you were saying,
Yes.
and just continue with life. And then I feel like I'm really struggling. And then I'm like, okay. So I actually had to get up to a point of, okay, you know what? I have depression.
Radical acceptance.
There you go.
Good morning, good evening, good afternoon, wherever you are. This is Dolly Ochola from Kavaya's Daughter Speaks. And today I am very honored to have again, for the second time, the Honorable Miss Miriam Mwaria Ngugi, right?
Yes.
Um, Miriam is a wife, she's a mother, she's an author, an entrepreneur, and she's also an occupational therapist. She is a daughter, a sister, and a pastor's wife, and she is a boy mom, meaning that she's a mom to two beautiful, wonderful boys. And Miriam shared her story with us of how she overcame domestic violence and how she came out on the other end. She gave us some tips on how to overcome. And she also told us about how she was able to stay, why she stayed for so long. Now, today, Miriam is here to talk to us about another facet of her life, and that is about mental health and some tragedy that also happened in her life. But I'll let Miriam introduce herself briefly and then say hi to us, and then we'll move on from there. You're very welcome, Miriam.
Thank you so much, especially for having me another time.
Mhm.
Um, Miriam, Goge is my husband, Mwari is my father,
Mhm.
and grateful to be here. And I say my story, hope that it impacts even just one person. So I'm here to share my life openly. It's something that I do, not not to just show myself out to the world. That's not my aim at all. It
Mhm.
is to be helpful to people out there, because I know we suffer from different things, and I hope I can be a light and testimony that we can overcome whatever we go through.
Okay. Thank you so much, Miriam, for being with us. Again, this is for the second time. The last time we had you as our guest, Miriam, you talked to us about your marriage, your childhood, your teenage years, and your eventual marriage to John, who was
Mhm.
your the first person you got into a relationship with after you came to the U.S., and
Mhm.
how that ended up being a domestic violence situation, and how you were able to bravely get out of that. And there was a beautiful son, John, who was Johnny, who was
Yeah.
born out of that marriage. So let's start from there. You're now a mother, a single mother to John, because John came to you 2 years after you left his dad. Now, let me ask you, and then you got into a very beautiful marriage, and now you're married. And as you told us when we last talked, you didn't just come from there to a beautiful marriage. There was growth in between. So let's start from the point of John, your ex-husband. Did he ever go to therapy so that he can, maybe work on his anger issues? Did he seek change for himself? Did he ever apologize to you? Or was that the apology that you learn to accept that you'll never get?
Wow, that's a good question.
Mm-hmm.
I'll go back just a little bit to say we actually tried um, all kinds of things while we were still married. One of the things that we did was, because this might be helpful to somebody else,
Mm-hmm.
we did celebrate recovery. I don't know whether people are familiar with that. It's a recovery program in the Christian setting, and it's about taking care of your hang-ups. I don't remember how what the slogan is, but
Mm-hmm.
it's a recovery group which encompasses a lot of things. So it doesn't have to be just drugs and alcohol, which was a problem, by the way. I didn't mention that drugs and alcohol was a problem in our marriage as well.
Okay. On whose
Um,
part? Could you clarify?
Yes,
For both of
John
you.
had,
John.
yeah,
Oh,
John had the problem.
okay.
And so you had mentioned in the other session, you said something about financial abuse. I
Mm-hmm.
didn't quite experience financial abuse, but because of his drinking and drug problem, he would use up all the money. He would have money in the account and then it would be completely gone.
Okay.
But so we tried that, and actually, he enjoyed Celebrate Recovery. We did it together, him and I. And then he also, at some point, went on by himself to Teen Challenge, which is
Okay.
another Christian based
Mm-hmm.
uh,
Recovery.
teen recovery program.
Mm-hmm.
And this now highlights where when you have a problem with addiction and you have a mental illness, how it's important to take care of that. Because the reason he left Teen Challenge was because he actually went into mania. He was bipolar, and
Okay.
so because he was no longer self-medicating and all that, then he went into mania and they couldn't handle that. Teen Challenge is not equipped for the medical part of that problem, and most people end up being both mentally ill and having addictions. So he was sent home. In fact, towards the end of our marriage, he was so sick and so refused treatment, and so the abuse was so much worse. And
Okay.
that's the point at which I left, because then I actually was afraid for my life for real. So he did try that, but then eventually he just didn't get the help. He didn't take medication. Years later, I remember when I had my second born, being on the phone with him, because we did have conversations. We had conversations because, and you're right, Johnny is actually John. He's John the third.
Okay.
His father is John the second, and the grandfather is John Senior, the original.
Mm-hmm.
So they have the same name.
Mm-hmm.
Um, so while Johnny was growing into his teenage years, he had some issues, and one of those days he drove from Alabama to South Carolina to his dad without me knowing that he did. So
Okay.
that prompted us to talk about him and what's going on with him. So we still parented
Mm-hmm.
together,
Mm-hmm.
even with me being in my new marriage. We had a way of doing it. So I totally forgive him. And he did tell me, again, like I said in the last um, time we were together, that for me, it ended well.
Mm-hmm.
So because there was no longer a reason to fight me anymore, my life has gone on. So one of those conversations we had, he told me, I really held you back, didn't I? Now
Mm-hmm.
look at you, you're doing so well, and I'm
Mm-hmm.
sorry for have to have held you back. So he said sorry for that.
Mm-hmm.
He never really did say sorry for the abuse, but I knew that was all encompassed in there.
Mm-hmm.
Now, I'm going to say something that might be kind of interesting. I'll just say it because like you said, I'm very transparent.
Mm-hmm.
John did actually finally pass away.
Oh.
He just could not overcome his problem with addiction, and that eventually took his life.
Oh.
Um, when I grieved that death
Mm-hmm.
quite a bit.
Sorry
It's a
about that.
very, yes, it
Mm-hmm.
is very interesting because I was married to John for 10 years.
Mm-hmm.
Officially, towards the seventh year was really the last year we were together, but
Mm-hmm.
we were married for 10.
Mm-hmm.
And so there's a lot of grief that comes with that. And like I said, towards the end, we were parenting together. Now he had his issues, but even our last conversation was a good conversation.
Mhm.
We were talking. He could hear my baby in the background, and he said, "Oh, is that your baby?"
Mm.
And that's when he told me how, he's so proud of the life that I'm living.
Mm.
But then I also told him, we can't just have conversations all the time, because again, you have to have boundaries,
Yes.
because I'm married. And
Mm.
so he didn't like that, but that's how we ended, because I didn't want to keep having these conversations, because we're Johnny's parents, but that's it. I
Mhm.
don't want to ever have any other relationship
Mhm.
about that. But when he died, I really felt that grief. But one of the things that I'm forever grateful for is that I forgave him, and that conversation happened where he said, sorry for holding you back.
Mm.
Now, the part that I'm going to say is interesting, because I remember walking on the beach. We
Mhm.
used to live close to the beach in South Carolina. And so when I went for his
Funeral.
celebration of life,
Mm.
yeah, I was the day of the funeral. I was walking on the beach by myself, just crying, tears pouring down my face. And I was remembering the walks we used to have on the beach. And I felt like he was there. I felt like he said, "I'm so sorry for everything I put you through."
Mm.
And so that's the first and only time that I felt like he said sorry,
Mm.
was during his death, as I was grieving. So I know that's out there a little bit, but
Mm.
in his uh rest, and I totally believe that he's in heaven, by the way. I
Mm.
believe that because he was seeking the Lord. And I also believe that, God in his mercy
Mm.
takes care of his own. If you've given your life to Christ at some point in your life, I'm just a believer that you never lose that eternal life.
Mm.
um so I totally believe he's in heaven. So I feel like in his heavenly um, body, he was able to minister to me and tell me that he was sorry for what he did.
Mhm. Okay. Okay. So, wow, that is a tough one. That's a tough one, and
Yeah.
that's like a curve that I didn't expect. I was expecting
Yeah. I
different.
told you my story can make a movie.
Yeah. And so, how was Johnny? How did Johnny take his dad's
Oh,
passing?
that was tough. So let's talk about that a little bit, because Johnny, do you remember you asked me a question on the other video? You
Mm-hmm.
asked me whether Johnny knew that I was being abused and how
Mm-hmm.
he took it and all that.
Yes.
Well, so let me give you some context to all
Okay.
this.
Mm-hmm.
When Johnny was a teenager, things started getting harder. Now, he used to talk with his dad a lot. And when he was, I want to say, a freshman in high school,
Mm-hmm.
he decided he wants to go live with his dad. He
Okay.
just felt like we were not, I was too strict, and
Mm.
just things weren't working. And I mean, he has a right to do that. So he went. I knew that his dad was struggling in his addiction, and I
Okay.
knew that that wasn't a good thing. But then want to be, I didn't want to hold my son back. And
Okay.
at this time, they were communicating. So
Mm-hmm.
he went, and his dad was already in another relationship, which we knew, and so it was fine. Um, but what he experienced there
Okay.
was his dad and his partner in addiction.
Okay.
And there's a lot more that went on, because he left that partner and they moved back. They were in North Carolina, they moved back to South Carolina. There was a lot of instability in
Okay.
that semester that he went there.
Mm-hmm.
And he came back. It was actually right before I got married. He was gonna come. So he went that semester of, I think it was in November that we, yeah, because it was about Thanksgiving time that I took him to his dad.
Okay.
And then he stayed for that semester from December, January, started the new semester, January, February, March.
Mm-hmm.
Then that summer is
Mm-hmm.
when I was getting married. So the plan was for him to come.
Okay.
and stay with us, come to the wedding and then
Mm-hmm.
go back to his dad.
Okay.
Well, Johnny came for the wedding,
Mm-hmm.
and while we were making preparation, I was taking him to get his suit for the wedding and everything.
Mm-hmm.
He just burst out crying.
Okay.
And he said, Mom, I can't go back to dad.
Mm.
And he wouldn't tell me details. But
Okay.
at this point, he's 16 years old. Can you imagine? He's 16 years old and he's crying.
Mm.
And I was like, oh my goodness. And so I found out whatever details he got to know about his dad
Mm.
were very incredibly difficult for him. He actually, at some point, told me, now I believe you. I can see how dad would hurt you.
So he pretty much experienced his dad in his real, okay.
Yes.
And that was like a death to him, like a
Yes.
death of the father he knew.
Yes.
Now he comes to realize, okay.
So then that was the first time. And then the second time, I told you how I think I mentioned, I may not have mentioned on the video, but
Mhm.
my son, Johnny, at some point got upset about something. I think it was like the following year or something, because it was that we were already married at this point, and I think we even had the baby. So
Mhm.
it was like 2017 in there,
Mhm.
2018, going into 2018, when he started having some real issues. But one of the things that he did, he took off because I wouldn't allow him. There's somewhere he wanted to go, and it was a school night, and I said no. And
Mhm.
so he got upset, got it, and he had a car at this point, got
Mhm.
into his car and drove all the way in the middle of the night to South Carolina
Or to
from
see his dad.
Birmingham, Alabama. Yeah, to his dad. Showed up at his dad's doorstep.
Mhm.
He didn't even know he was coming. And so we got talking about that. That's how we ended up with our last conversations,
Mhm.
because now we were talking through that.
Mhm.
But after that time that he went to see his dad, when he came back and I had him in counseling and all that, they had conversations over the phone. And I just remember at some point, Johnny stopped talking to his dad. He
Okay.
was upset at him and he said, and I remember telling him, he's your dad, you still, he's like, I have nothing to say to him anymore.
Mhm.
So when his father passed away, they were not on talking terms.
Oh, wow.
So
Ooh, that's
I
difficult.
That's devastating. I don't think Johnny actually recovered from that,
Okay.
because he has a very kind, sensitive heart. And I
Mhm.
think the fact that his dad died when they were not talking
Mm.
broke him completely. In fact, he got sick completely after that.
Okay. Oh my goodness. So when he came to for the wedding at 16, he never went back.
He
I know
never
he
went back.
he never
Mhm.
went back. So he left, and at that point he had only lived with the dad for a couple of months, pretty much less
Yes.
than a year. Okay.
Mhm.
So pretty much from the time he was 7, he was with you.
Yes, from the
Oh,
time he was 9,
9.
because seven to nine he was with his dad and his grandparents.
Okay, okay. So now we have Johnny who was mourning his dad, like
Mhm.
the dad, the person his dad was. That was a death to him. He's
Yes.
mourning the person that the dad is, and then his dad now physically passes away, and so now he's also mourning the absence of his father, the physical absence of his father. That must have been a very difficult time for him and also for you, because this is someone that you loved. This is someone you were married to for 10 years and you had a baby together,
Mhm.
Yeah. So now, fast forward, when do you discover that you have mental health challenges other than the domestic violence? What was the point that you discovered that? And did the domestic violence trigger all this? Or this was already there and you just did not know?
I have come to find out over the course of my healing journey
Mm-hmm.
that I probably had depression even as a child. We just didn't know and didn't know how to. I went to a mental health place and
Mm-hmm.
they sent me to counseling.
Mm-hmm.
During that marriage, I was definitely depressed. In fact,
Okay.
when I started doing the counseling sessions, my counselor sent me to my doctor and said, you need antidepressants. And
Okay.
so I talked to my doctor and was on antidepressants. So that's the first time I got on antidepressants. I even got suicidal. And one of those days, and I highlight it in my book as well, is that One of the days we had a really bad fight, and this time it's the worst I can remember physically. And
Mm-hmm.
he, you know, banged me on the wall, and just a really bad fight.
Mm-hmm.
And I was done. And I swallowed all the pills that I had. It's actually
Mm-hmm.
a miracle that I am alive,
Mm-hmm.
because that should have taken my life, but
Mm-hmm.
didn't. So my depression manifested then for the first time in a really real way. Then I continued with therapy after I left the home, and then I was fine for years. The next time the depression set in
Mm-hmm.
was after Johnny's dad passed, because then Johnny also now got sick.
Okay.
Johnny actually got a serious mental illness. And
Mm-hmm.
so during his illness, I got sick. Now my depression and anxiety manifested itself
Okay.
again. So that was about 2018, 2019.
Okay. Okay. Now, how did you navigate grieving and helping your son to grieve?
I didn't. I can say that. I remember a friend of mine telling me that, consider going to a grief counseling or grief share group.
Mm-hmm.
And I didn't. I just went through the motions, like, when we went to the funeral
Mm-hmm.
and went through that. And then I would talk to Johnny, but he didn't want to ever talk about his dad.
Okay.
Um, and I remember, so his dad was cremated and Johnny was given the ashes. And I remember saying, do you want to do a ceremony? I
Mm-hmm.
can help you. Or do you want to go back to South Carolina and do it there? Do you want to do it here in Alabama? And I can buy a place, at the gardens, because they have places where you can have the ashes.
Mm-hmm.
And he just wouldn't come up with a decision.
Mm-hmm.
So we just let it go. Um, Eventually, I had mentioned to you at some point that we had a fire in our house, and
Okay.
so then it became no longer an option because everything was burnt, and that included his dad's ashes. So
Mm-hmm.
we never had a closure in terms of him really going through the grieving with that.
Mm-hmm.
So I know for sure we didn't. What I did try to do was get him counseling,
Mm-hmm.
because he was struggling with school. He was struggling with just in general, he was just having a hard time. So I did put him in counseling, and he
Mm-hmm.
did it for a little bit. Even by the time he was running away and going to his dad's house that middle of the night,
Mm-hmm.
he was already in counseling. Um, so by the time his dad died, he had access to the counseling, but
Okay.
he was no longer going.
Okay. Was
Yeah.
did he feel that he was okay, so he didn't need to go for counseling, or
It's a
was he
very
discharged?
interesting thing because I couldn't enforce it, because
Okay.
he was 18, and
Okay.
when now kids are 18 in this country, you can't even enforce their treatment. You
Yeah.
have to They have to want to do it, and they have to want you to be part of it. And I
Mm-hmm.
was no longer a part of his counseling sessions. In fact, I never was, because he was 17, turned 18, and they wouldn't let me into his counseling sessions, so I didn't have anything to do with it.
Mm-hmm. So now, okay, so Johnny is growing, he's growing older, and he's still facing mental health challenges, and you're still facing your own challenges. So were you depressed pretty much throughout, or were you in and out of depression after John passed away, your ex-husband passed away?
Um, I actually, I would say, now you're making me think. You make me think through these things and you ask these questions.
Mm-hmm.
Um, because I didn't relate it to John's death at all.
Mm-hmm.
I related it to Johnny's ability or inability to cope,
Okay.
that led to his mental illness. And so
Okay.
his mental illness manifested in actually psychosis. And
Okay.
so when he went into psychosis, then I had a hard time. Just in general, that stress of dealing with a very ill, mentally ill son.
Mm-hmm.
I started having symptoms. Mine started manifesting like stroke symptoms. I
Okay.
would lose my speech. I would lose my vision. It was manifesting that way.
Mm-hmm.
And then we finally figured out that this was anxiety. So I was having panic attacks that would make my body shut down,
Mm-hmm.
basically. And so it was the stress of not knowing how to help Johnny and doing whatever I needed to do to help him.
Okay.
And so I would say it has been consistent
Okay.
since then. Now,
Okay.
there are times that it's better. So, like now, right now, um, I'm really good.
Mm-hmm.
I really think depression has phases of remission, for lack of a better term, and then exacerbation. And I feel like there are times that it's just better and there's times that it's not. For me, since 2019, it's been consistent.
Okay. So you do have chronic depression.
Yes,
Okay.
absolutely. I'm diagnosed, I'm on medication.
Yeah, because depression can also be situational, where
Yes,
it's a death or an event, and then you go through depression, and then you never have depression ever again in your life,
yeah,
because it was tied to a certain period of your life or a specific event. So
yeah.
now let's talk about psychosis, because people don't know what psychosis is.
Okay.
How did you experience psychosis in Johnny?
So, what it looked like for him, he
Mm-hmm.
was screaming obscenities. He took off all his clothes, and we had literally had to be held down and calmed down with medicine. So
Mm-hmm.
for him was full out just disassociation with
Mm-hmm.
reality.
Okay. And so then I'm sure he went to into a mental health facility, right?
Yes.
Okay.
Hmm.
As an inpatient, like admitted
Yes.
to the
Oh,
hospital.
yeah. Yeah,
Oh.
he was completely incapable of anything.
Mm-hmm.
His first psychotic break. Psychosis is a very serious symptom of mental illness,
Mm-hmm.
and it needs treatment. You cannot keep somebody with psychosis at home. They
Mm-hmm.
have to be in a mental health institution where they're being medicated.
Mm-hmm.
And a lot of that happens even without their consent because it is that serious. It has to be brought under control so that then you'll be able to live a life. So
Mm-hmm.
for him, he had to be in hospital. It took a while for them to even be able to control him.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and finally, when they did, then he could come out. But for him, it was very difficult because he would refuse medication because then you're supposed to be on medication throughout. He'd
Mm-hmm.
refuse medication and so ended up in and out of the hospital so many times, just
Mm-hmm.
trying to keep him balanced. It's
Mm-hmm.
a very it's a very tough. He was eventually diagnosed with schizoaffective disorder, which is a mix of schizophrenia
Mm-hmm.
and bipolar disorder.
Mm-hmm.
Very, very, very difficult
Okay.
um, mental illness.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, it requires treatment.
Yes,
So,
definitely requires treatment. And
yeah.
the thing about schizophrenia or any mental illness, chronic mental illness, is the deception that happens when you
Mm-hmm.
take medication for a long time and now you're feeling okay.
Mm-hmm.
And you decide, you know what, I'm okay. Like, why do I need medication? That happens like a lot of times because you
Yeah.
feel so okay. And actually, there's people who never even know that you have any mental health illness
Yeah.
because your medication and you're living a normal life. So that's one thing
Yeah.
I want to say is that you can have all those disorders and live a normal life,
Absolutely.
and people might not know. So
Absolutely.
so now Johnny has schizoaffective disorder, and you have anxiety showing up as panic attacks, and you
Mm-hmm.
also have depression.
Yes.
So, how are you coping? How are you taking care of yourself? You have a newborn baby, right?
Mm-hmm.
You have a newborn baby, so there's also sometimes postpartum depression, or there's hormonal issues going on there. And now
Mm-hmm.
you have Johnny. How was that? Because um I just want to take a deep breath, because I don't even know how you're able to manage that. And even for your husband, for your new husband,
Yeah.
that's a lot.
It was a lot. I remember the first time that Johnny went into psychosis. I'm also a healthcare professional. I'm an OT, occupational therapist. So there's a part of my brain that can switch to crisis mode. So
Mm-hmm.
like when he went into psychosis that time, I totally went into let's figure out, because he was staying with somebody else. At this point, he wasn't staying at home.
Mm-hmm.
And I said, call the ambulance right now. When I got there, the police got there before the ambulance. I would tell them, don't hurt him. He's this is not him. Cover him up, because he was completely without clothes. I'm like, cover him up. Don't yell at him. I went into let's take control of the crisis.
Mm-hmm.
And so I was on that control of the crisis mode for that fast, because it was a whole month that he couldn't be stabilized. And I
Mm-hmm.
remember going to hospital with one of my friends
Mm-hmm.
to see him, and he's fairly stable, but not really. And she looked at me, she's like, how are you doing this? I'm like, I just wake up every day,
Mm-hmm.
take the next step.
Mm-hmm.
That's all you can do.
Mm-hmm. It's like it was almost like an robotic, automatic kind
Yes,
of existence. Okay.
yes.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, because then you have the baby, you
Mm,
know, you have dad here. So we would divide. When I have to deal with Johnny when he's like that, I'm like, okay, baby is with you right now. Or my one of my really close friends has helped me raise him, basically. So
mhm,
she would have him so that I can then deal with Johnny.
mhm.
And I think for me, I didn't do a very good job of taking care of myself, because I
Mm,
was always on that kind of mode. And that's why
okay,
the panic attacks would come so frequently. In fact, I had to leave my employment because I couldn't work anymore. I was
okay,
just so sick. Yeah.
okay. So then let's go get ahead. Now, Johnny has been stabilized. Did he go back
Mhm.
to school? Was he in school? Was he in college?
He had graduated from high school, but
Okay.
never did go to college, because then that was around the time that he would have gone to college, and he just was never stable enough
Mm-hmm,
for long enough to be
mm-hmm,
able to go to college.
mm-hmm.
So
Because
it became,
mm,
I'll mention this too. Johnny also struggled with addiction to
okay.
substances. And so whenever he got into substances, it would get worse.
Mm, okay.
It's a really tough cycle.
I
Yeah.
know. It's like, yeah. And did he start using substances when he was exposed to them at his father's, or this was later?
I learned that
Oh,
he was exposed very young. I think around the time that I left when he was 7 years old. I actually think he was
oh,
exposed that early. Um, but the time that I knew that he was smoking, especially weed, I I noticed that in high school when he
okay.
was 17.
Mm-hmm.
Um, but I think he had experimented with more than that.
Mm-hmm.
In fact, when he went into psychosis that first time, I really thought it was drug induced
Okay.
psychosis,
Yes,
which
yes.
it could have been,
Mm-hmm.
and then it could have triggered the mental illness. It's just hard to tell because
Yes.
of all the trauma that he had, also, whatever happened with him and his dad, which I've never known the details of everything.
Okay.
So yeah, it's a very tough illness. Now I forget what question you asked me. I'm sorry.
I just asked you if you think he was exposed when he went to.
Yes, yes. I think he was exposed very early on in life, and then as he struggled with his relationship with his dad, and then especially as he struggled with the death, I think
Mm-hmm.
then it was full blown, tried
Mm-hmm.
all kinds of stuff and got addicted.
Mm-hmm. And I'll just say that addiction is very serious.
Yes.
At the end of this video, we'll also have information for those who are facing addiction of any type, or who have suicidal ideation, who are suicidal. But also, I'll say that it is very dangerous because sometimes people give their children a taste of alcohol, a taste of weed, or whatever it is. It is very dangerous to do that because you just don't know if that if that will be the it for your child. For some people, they try drugs and they never go back. But for some people, it just takes one time. And actually, for most people, it takes one time because nobody ever sets out to be an addict. Most
No.
people just want to try it and see how it feels, and then they become an addict. So it is very dangerous to expose your child to any type of drugs or any chemical that alters your functioning at a
Mm-hmm.
very young age when they are developing, because it usually doesn't end up well. So
Mm-hmm.
now, so Johnny is addicted, and he's suffering through mental illness. You're suffering through mental illness. You're raising the baby. You're newly married. How did that affect your relationship with your husband?
Whew. It was tough, but at the same time,
Mm-hmm.
we one of the things we set out even before things became hard, we had set out and said, um, we're going to do life together, no
Okay.
matter what. No
Okay.
matter what. It's not, there's no other option. We're going
Mm,
to be together. We're going to do life together, period.
mm-hmm.
So we had set that commitment even before we got married,
Okay.
um, and said, there's no out in this one. We're just going to, whatever comes our way, we're going to face it. So, with that in mind, as the things were coming, I remember one day my husband asking, will we ever have normal?
Mm,
Because it was so with John before we actually realized he had a mental illness, because
mm-hmm.
we had seen it as rebellion.
Mm,
Uh, and gradually it just became, we did a lot of surviving. We were on survival mode quite a bit.
mm-hmm.
And you just do the next thing. You just do the next thing. You just do the next thing. So it was tough, especially when we realized it was a mental illness, and we were now working through what needs to be done. We divided and conquered, is what we would say. So he would take over the baby,
Mm,
whatever the baby needs, and when we're in crisis mode, I'll take over what Johnny needed. So we separated it that way so that we can
okay.
function.
Mm-hmm.
The hardest part was when I was so sick. Now,
Okay.
when I was so sick, that was very difficult for everybody. And for me, what that looked like was, sometimes I'm unable to get out of bed.
Mm,
Sometimes when I get out of bed, I'm so weak because it manifested in my body. I
mm,
couldn't do anything. I could only sit. I could go from the couch to the bed,
yes.
to the bathroom, and
Mm,
that's about all I could do. So when I had those severe symptoms, those are the hardest times, because then he had not only to work, he had to take care of the baby, he had to take care of me.
mm,
Johnny was in and out of our house quite a bit, so he didn't. And eventually, Johnny got his own treatment team, and so he had his own housing, and he needs taken care of. So he
okay.
wasn't home. We didn't have to deal with him in the home.
Okay.
After, I think it was 2020, that he
Okay.
got that, the ability to be taken care of by this really great organization. So now it was mostly me and my husband and my baby.
Mm-hmm.
And so my illness, several times I ended up in the hospital
Okay.
because I was suicidal. And
Okay.
so I would stay 2, 3 days. And so my husband had to take off work all the
Okay.
time so that he could be the baby.
Mm,
So those were very difficult days. And there were many,
mm,
of those days.
mm.
And so mental illness affects not just the person,
Yes.
but your family. It's
Mm-hmm.
a family disease. You have to, in fact, my little boy, because I was so weak all the time, he actually learned. He'd look at me, he's like, Mommy, are you weak? Because I would have to hold on to the walls and all that. And
Yeah.
to think that mental illness can actually show itself up like that.
Yes. Physical symptoms. Yes.
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 And then I would be in pain. I remember I was taking some pain medicine for my left shoulder, my left arm, because
Mm-hmm.
I was in pain.
Yeah.
Um, it's mental illness is quite something.
Yeah, it is. It is. It does show up physically, and that's why sometimes, especially women, which is a bias and it's not good, when women go to the ER and they're having a heart attack, sometimes we
Hmm.
just tell them, you know what, that's, go home and reduce the stress in your life because they're thinking it's a mental health symptom because it actually does show up as a mental health. I mean, physically, mental health shows up physically as a physical symptom.
Yeah,
Now, so Miriam, you get a little bit better, right? You start
yeah,
having treatment and you get better, but Johnny wasn't quite stable. He had periods of stability and then periods of instability.
yes,
Okay, so can you just tell us his story, please?
yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So my sweet Johnny,
Mm-hmm.
he had, and a lot of that was, like I said, when he had the problem with the drugs, so
Mm-hmm.
he would mix. And for people with serious mental illness, there's something about the street drugs that they feel like helps their brain better than the psychotic drugs, because the psychotic drugs also like mellow, not just mellow them out, but they have side effects that they feel so bad.
Yes.
And so it's very hard. I actually can understand why
Mm-hmm.
somebody would look for something else that would make you feel better,
Mm-hmm.
more human,
Mm-hmm.
because those others can be very difficult. But he fought, and he fought hard.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and so what his life looked like would be, like we said, you can have mental illness and be completely normal. So we had
Yes.
completely normal, you know, he would work, he would come home and hang out with us, he would, do regular stuff. He was,
Mm.
go to church with us,
Okay.
just live a regular life. And then he would have symptoms, and then he would end up out on the streets looking for drugs, and then he would end up in jail. We had a lot of jail time. And a lot of that jail time had to do with keeping him out of the streets so that he's safe,
Yes. Okay.
and so that he's not a danger to himself or to others.
Mm-hmm.
We had where we had to hospitalize him legally,
Okay.
sign up. Uh, so that he's not a danger to himself and others,
Mm-hmm.
so that he can be treated. So we had periods like that. Then we
Okay.
had periods where other people would find him and so take him to the hospital themselves, and I would find out he's in hospital.
Mm.
But we'd also have, like I said, I have several videos of us having time together, just
Mm-hmm.
doing normal things as a family. He would say, Hey, Mom, can I come home this weekend? I'm like, Sure. Pick him up, bring him home, and would spend the weekend
Mm-hmm.
and spend a lot of those, resting but, being part of the family. Um, so, one of the things that he also did try, he reached a point where he wanted the help. The other thing is, when somebody has an addiction,
Yes.
they have to want the help,
Yes. Mm-hmm.
because it's a lot of work to get better, just like it is with a mental illness. Even
Yes.
for me, to be okay, I have to accept. In fact, I had to reach a point of total acceptance, because I have gone through where I'm taking meds and then I'm like, I feel good, I'm fine, like you were saying,
Yes.
and just continue with life. And then I feel like I'm really struggling. And then I'm like, okay. So I actually had to get up to a point of, okay, you know what? I have depression.
Radical acceptance.
There you go. And I said, I need to function. And
Okay.
so I got to that point, and now I'm consistent with my doctor's appointments, with medication changes, with counseling, whatever it takes to
Mhm.
keep me functioning. It's
Okay.
the same way for somebody with addiction. You have to get, nobody can do it for you. You
Yeah.
have to reach the point you say, I just need to function. I
Mhm.
have this problem. My brain is not working like it should. I'm gonna get the help that I need. And so he got there. He got there and he said, I just, okay, whatever we need to do. And so we started looking for rehab centers. But for him, we had to get a rehab that also deals with mental illness.
Mhm.
It was very difficult to find that.
Mhm.
So he chose to go to a place where he it was a Christian environment because
Okay.
he grew up, like I told you, I grew up a Christian,
Yeah.
grew up in the church. I gave my life to Christ when I was little. And
Mhm.
so he also grew up in that and actually gave his life to Christ when he was little in Sunday school. And
Okay.
so he always had a pull towards the things of God. And so he chose this place, and this was a place that he went. He went in for a month, but
Okay.
then again, because he needed the balance of the medication and all that, he was
Yeah.
getting some treatment, but he needed more than what he was
Okay.
getting, so he went into psychosis. Now what that looked like at that point,
Mhm.
we no longer had the extreme psychosis that he had the very first time when he was screaming and what all that was not controlled. But now, because he has been on medication,
Yeah.
he he would just kind of lose touch with reality
Mhm.
and what it looked like. He would see and hear things that are not necessarily
Hallucinations.
there. Yeah, he would
Yeah.
have hallucinations. He
Mhm.
would, so for example, that day, I think he felt like people were going to hurt him. And so
Mhm.
he was trying to fight them. And so they were like, we can't have this. They kicked him out, but then he called me. He was still sound of mind enough to be able to call me and say, hey, um, I've been kicked out. And I said, what happened? Well, these guys were trying to fight me, and I was trying to get away from whatever it was, which was all not real. They were
Mhm.
not trying to hurt him. It's just, his mind was playing games on him. And so I picked him up, and in the car, he's
Mhm.
listening to the radio,
Mhm.
and there's somebody talking, and he feels like he can communicate with them. And so that's what it looks like.
Mm.
He's there, but his reality is so distorted.
Mhm.
Um, so he's talking to the person on the radio, and he's like, "Mom, let's do what he says."
Mhm.
This was a fundraiser that was there. He's like, "Okay, let's give that money for that," and he's just would center himself on something would captivate his attention, and then he's all in with it.
Mhm.
And so the way you and I would be able to listen, and we know that's just a commercial, or that's what,
Yes.
for him it was like he's honed in into it. So
Mhm.
that's what now his psychosis looked like. I was never like afraid of him,
Okay.
or anything like that. Yeah. But it manifests differently, especially when you have some kind of medication that you're taking. It
Mhm.
can be controlled.
So then maybe that facility was not well equipped to handle him
Oh,
because.
it wasn't at all. It's very difficult when you have to deal with both. You can't deal with just the addiction. You have to be able to deal with the mental health part
Mhm.
of it as well. So
Yeah.
actually, after that psychotic episode, um, he came home. I took him to the
Mhm.
hospital, but they didn't take him. Again, I think he had been in and out of this particular hospital so much that they had just stopped taking him for whatever reason. I don't know. I don't understand it. I
Mhm.
think that was wrong of them to
Mhm.
send him back home because he was clearly in psychosis.
Mhm.
Um, but they sent him back home. And then what would happen in instances like that, why it was so hard to be with him at home, he would, for example, turn on the music, he would turn
Mm.
on the TV and put it to 100.
Mm-hmm.
the volume to 100,
Yeah.
and to him it's fine. To everybody else, obviously, that's totally uncomfortable.
Mm-hmm.
And then he would not sleep, so he's up, moving up and down, um, then moving, outside. You can hear him talking to himself,
Mm-hmm.
screaming, but not hurting anybody.
Yeah.
Then he ended up knocking on somebody's door at 2 a.m.
Mm.
asking for a cigarette. And so they called the police on him.
Okay.
Um, and the police knew that he was just, not he
Well.
was not a yeah he was not a danger or anything. But for me, he would also get paranoid. So
Mm.
so so they took him to the jail, not because he did anything wrong, but again to keep him safe
Mm-hmm.
and to help me. That I still remember them saying, we're just gonna take him. We're gonna take him so that you can rest tonight, because we couldn't sleep when he was like that. So you can
Mm.
rest tonight, and then in the morning
Mm-hmm.
we'll find a way to get him into the hospital. Which
Mm-hmm.
I'm so glad that our police force here is learning how to have a mental health division, and they have one. Not everybody does, but
Okay.
this particular police city,
Mm-hmm.
they have it. And so from there, he got the person who's in charge of the mental health, and they were able to get him into the hospital.
Okay.
So he went straight from jail into the hospital. He needed to be there, and he was there for almost 2 months, because
Mm.
sometimes it does take that long. And one of
Mm-hmm.
the things that I learned to do was to advocate for him. So I would be on the phone, and he let me too, because he
Mm-hmm.
had to have let me be able to talk to the treatment team. And
Yeah.
so I would talk to them. If I talk to him on the phone and I hear something is off, I'm like, well, did he have this medication? And he was very good at knowing what works for him and what doesn't. And I
Okay.
would tell them, if he tells you it's not working, he's
Just
right.
that. Mm-hmm.
Yes, he's right. If he says this is what you'd prefer, he's right. Let him have the medication. He actually knows his medications. Because one of the things is, with the stigma, people assume that because you go into psychosis and you're not in your right mind all the time, that you don't know what you're
Yes.
talking about. That is a fallacy. He
Mm-hmm.
knew himself, and he knew the medications that work and those that don't work. But eventually, they found a really good balance of
Okay.
everything. And
Mm-hmm.
so that was September 2022
Mm-hmm.
into November, and he came out November just. And I remember his words to me. He's like, "Mom, I feel like I did before I got sick."
Mm.
It was so beautiful. He had the right medication. He was, confident about life. Somehow he wanted to live at home, but we just didn't. I kept telling him, you're good right now, but you have to keep up with your treatment. And I don't have what I need to equip you. I'm not equipped to help you with your treatment. So you have to stay with a team and
Mm-hmm.
have your own place so that they can take care of you.
Mm-hmm.
So it was a very tough roller coaster of a ride, and it takes time to find the right treatment.
Mm-hmm.
Even for me, it has taken time to find the right treatment where I'm feeling well, a length of time,
Mm-hmm.
without having to go back to the hospital, which I've had to do myself as well. I've been in and out of the hospital.
Okay.
Um, Mental health is just different. In It takes time to find the right balance of medication.
Mm-hmm. Okay. So now Johnny is stable. Then let's go to 20. That is 2022, right?
Mhm.
So then what happened?
So,
How did and when I asked that is how did he fall back again?
yes,
And I don't know if falling back again is the correct word, but you know what I mean, right? Like
I
how
know what you
I'm
mean.
sick again.
So mentally, he was taking his medications. He was fine.
Mm-hmm.
Um, Now remember, he's also has addiction.
Yes.
So that is still a disease. I know people
Mhm.
have a hard time. They're like, it's a choice. It's not. There's just something about it that once in your brain that hasn't, you know, been taken care of, is
Mhm.
still an issue.
Yes.
So he actually told me, Mom, I'm relapsing,
Mhm.
meaning he's going back to drugs. And I
Mhm.
asked him, what do you need? You have all the help that we can get you. You can get a sponsor. So some of the things that you can do when you're in addiction, you can go to AA, which is Alcoholic Anonymous, or NA, which is Narcotics Anonymous,
Mhm.
and they have a way. It's a group of people that have gone through the same things, and they help each other. So he
Mhm.
had a sponsor.
Mhm.
He told me, I'm going to go to meetings. I'm going to do. I'm like, yeah, we're doing the right things. But then I told him, now that your mental health is in a better place, your medication is right, you're following up on this. Now maybe you can go back to the place that you were before.
Mhm.
But he also knew that it was restricting. Again, you
Mhm.
have to want it. You have to
Mhm.
want, because it's hard. It's hard work. It's
Yes.
hard, hard, hard. And I remember telling him, you can go back. And he said, okay, can you call them for me? And I
Mhm.
said, Johnny, you know that you have to be the one to call,
Yes.
not me. And
Yes.
so he didn't. So there's a part of him, I feel like, knew that he needed the help,
Okay.
was getting the help, but didn't want the long term treatment because it was hard.
Mhm.
And I think he also thought he could handle, but then it became very clear by December 2022, I could tell that he was struggling quite a bit, because he also stopped. Once the other thing that happens is he starts isolating. That's a very dangerous place to be, when you start
Yeah.
isolating yourself. And he
Mhm.
had been involved in the youth groups at church. He had been doing stuff, and then he just started withdrawing
Okay.
from them. He
Mhm.
also started withdrawing from us. I remember I would call him. I'm like, hey, are you coming this weekend? No, I'm gonna do some other things. Okay, I would call him and say, hey, can you want to go to church tomorrow? No, he just started withdrawing,
Mhm.
and that's a very, very difficult place to be when you start withdrawing, because then you're probably surrounding yourself with the people that are doing the drugs and all
Yes.
that. So I knew he had relapsed. He had told us he had relapsed. And one of the days, February, now we are into 2023,
Mhm.
February 13th, 2023, he calls me, or he sends me a text, and he said, Mom, I overdosed. Please come get me. I'm at the hospital.
Mhm.
And so we went. Our baby at that point is in preschool. So we drop him off at preschool.
Mhm.
My husband, I tell him, we're not going home. We're going to go over to the hospital. Johnny is admitted.
Mhm.
And so we go there, and he's fine. We had text back and forth, because he texted me like at 5 o'clock in the morning. And
Mhm.
we had text back and forth, and he's like, when are you coming? I said, we have to drop your brother off and then come. And so it was about 9-ish that we went to check on him, and he told me that he was going to be released.
Mhm.
I talked to the doctors and nurses. Really, the doctor hadn't done the round yet, and they're like, no, we hadn't released him yet, but the doctor might.
Mhm.
And so, we talk through, and they give us there's a life-saving kit
Knock.
that you can get
Knock.
for free, Narcan. They
Mhm.
give us Narcan and say, have this in case this happens again, and you can administer it. So we're walking out of the hospital. My boy is just, he's okay, but he's not feeling well. But
Mhm.
we talk, and he tells me, Mom, I got the wrong stuff. The guy gave me the wrong stuff. And I'm like, what do you mean?
Mhm.
It's like, that's not the stuff I was getting. He got me the wrong stuff.
Mhm.
And I'm like, should you even be talking about this? Like, should we be talking about the stuff you're getting? And we laugh about it. So one
Mhm.
of the things I learned is to be very, very transparent with John. And we
Mhm.
talk about these things, and no condemnation,
Mhm.
just, just, you know, you're struggling. This is what it's like, and I'm here for you the best I can be.
Mm,
And so we talked through that, and I said, and I asked him because he had got a gift from his grandparents,
mhm,
from his dad's side, for Christmas. And I asked, is it that money that you're still using?
mhm,
And he said, oh no, that was used a long time ago.
mhm.
And there's a backstory to how um, that we ended up giving him that money. I remember saying to him, I don't want to give you this. I'm so scared
Okay.
that
The
you're
money
going
that
to
his
go back.
grandparents had given him.
Yeah.
Okay.
And I told him, I'm so scared that you're going to go back
Mhm,
to the streets. And he said, I know, Mom. And I said, Johnny, if you go this time, I don't think you'll come out of it. And he's
mm,
like, I know. Because I told him, your system is clean. You have been taking your medications and all that. I'm
mhm,
so afraid that this is gonna take you out. We had that conversation.
mhm.
So that's February 13th, and it didn't take him out, but very close.
Okay, so
And
that's the money he used for the event, for buying the drugs that put him into
that
the
eventually got him there. But he said from then on, he had a way of finding money. That
mm,
money was gone, but he found a way of having money, and he would also sell his phone and all those kinds of things. I mean, addiction is really bad.
mhm,
Um, and so we leave him at his apartment that day, I remember, and he kisses me on the cheek, and I look at my husband, I'm like, what do we do? Should we just take him home? He's like, I mean, there's nothing we can do. Even if we take him home, he'll go out there when he wants to go out there. But I
mhm,
was like, just I don't know what to do. But when he would have those episodes, but this time, when he's sick, he's gone through that and he's in hospital, I always check on him. So I
mhm.
would check on him. Um, Long story short, I didn't hear from him at all that week. And so I went to check on him on Friday
You
and couldn't
physically
find
went.
him. I physically went to his apartment,
Mhm,
and I went early in the morning, which I knew his schedule. He wouldn't really get out of the house that early.
mhm,
And so I alerted his team. I was like, I can't find Johnny. I haven't been able to reach him all week. The last time I saw him was Monday. When was the
mhm,
last time anybody saw him? Because they would go there every day to give him his medication.
mhm,
And they couldn't remember whether it was Wednesday or Thursday that they last saw him. So
mhm,
it hadn't caused an alarm to them, but I was like, no, for me, he calls me.
mhm,
Long story short, my baby was found on that Sunday deceased.
mm.
And so we found out from the coroner's report that he had fentanyl poisoning, which is really sad because he was not looking to overdose or be
Yeah.
killed. He was going for whatever it was. They said they found a little bit of cocaine, like
Mhm,
very little
mhm,
cocaine. So whatever he was finding in the cocaine is what he was looking for, but
mhm,
somebody laced it with fentanyl.
mhm,
And so one of the things I tell young people whenever I can, I'm like, I know you're gonna go out there, you're gonna experiment, but there are
mhm,
people out there who are on purpose
mhm,
killing people because
mhm,
that's what it is. It's
mhm.
nobody's going out there looking for fentanyl in those high amounts.
Yeah.
So Johnny's story ends with him poisoned with fentanyl because
Mhm,
that's actually what they called it, poisoning.
mm.
Because
Yeah.
it's not, nobody takes that amount of fentanyl
Mhm.
unless somebody has laced it. So
Yeah.
Johnny lost his battle, but I am blessed because I know he did everything he knew how to do, the best he knew. He fought hard. He
Mm,
fought hard, and he left a legacy.
mm.
Um, there's a lot of details that we didn't get in here because it's amazing. An hour is so short.
Yeah, an hour is yeah, it's short, but it's okay. You can talk, I'm just thinking, about experimenting and about wanting to get the hit, when you're addicted.
Yeah.
And I do, I work I'm in mental health, and I do
Mhm.
work with kids, uh, and I do not specialize in alcohol and drugs intentionally, because I think it's a very tough place to work, and it's also very emotional even for the
Mhm.
providers, and that's why the best alcohol and drug counselors are the ones who have been there,
Mhm.
because they get it.
Mhm.
But I hear kids saying, oh, it happened in the 60s and people are okay, like they are still here. But the difference between the 60s and now is that in the 60s it was pure whatever you wanted. Coke,
Yes.
it was pure whatever you
Yes.
knew what you were getting.
Yes.
Now you don't know what you're getting.
You don't.
And in Swahili, there's that saying, mgema akisifiwa tembo hulitia maji, meaning mgema is someone who brews beer, traditional beer.
Mhm.
That when they get praises that their beer is so nice, they put more water because they want to sell more. They become greedy, so to speak.
Mhm.
And that's the same thing in the street, in the street life when it comes to drugs. When
Mhm.
someone says, oh, I want to buy from that person because the last time it made me feel really good, the person now gets the temptation to put a little bit more, just a little bit more, so that he can have, or he or she can have customers keep on coming to them, because usually when you get going for drugs, you want to get the highest high,
Mhm.
you know and that's what happens. So that's the danger, that you can actually try something, you think it's A, but you're actually getting A, B, and C.
Mhm.
The danger. And I am so sorry for your loss, Miriam. I know that that is such a tough place, and I am very grateful because you have shared your journey, your ups and downs, with Johnny, with those who are friends with you on Facebook. They do know your journey up and down. So how do you move on? After something like this has happened, how
Mhm.
do you move on? Because I know that there's somebody out there who needs that word of encouragement, or the tips on what to do and what not to do. Although I know this is a complex issue,
Mhm.
it's different for everyone. So there's no Bible, that you can write and say, this is exactly what you should do, because we are different. How do you move on?
You don't.
Mm-hmm.
Number one, you
Mm-hmm.
learn to live with it. Um, One of the things that I'm forever grateful for is that
Mm-hmm.
I was hands on. So even though I got sick myself, and the reason I got sick was because I was hands on all the way, deeply helping Johnny, I do not regret that 1 minute.
Mm-hmm.
Because the way you can say, I wish I could have, what
Mm-hmm.
should I have?
Mm-hmm.
Um, so if anybody's in a situation where you're having those issues with your child right now and they're still here with you,
Mm-hmm.
I would say concentrate on loving them. You hear, my very last communication with my child was us walking hand in hand and him being able to tell me that the stuff he had taken was not what he had bought.
Mm-hmm.
Having open communication, having having that loving relationship with your child, because there's nothing you can do. That's the honest truth. There's
Mm-hmm.
nothing you can do. You cannot take them. Like, that's what we were talking about with my husband, because I remember saying, what should I have brought him home that day? Should we have done? It's like, but you can't. He's not like our little Sydney, who you can force to do something because he's little. He's a grown up. If he walks out the door, there's nothing you can do.
Mm-hmm.
All you can do is love your children, and
Mm-hmm.
love them intensely, and love them unconditionally. Like, they know without a shadow of a doubt that they are loved.
Mm-hmm.
Don't condemn them. Don't make them feel bad. They already feel bad about being struggling, because it's a struggle and they can see that their life is falling apart.
Mm-hmm.
Just be the person that they can run to when things are bad. And that's how I knew, by the way, that something was wrong, because I was like, no, Johnny calls me no matter what. You see, it's like, point in case, he called me when he was in the hospital. He always did, because that's the kind of relationship I had with him.
Mm-hmm.
So that if anything ever happens, you have done everything you need to do as a parent. We did everything we knew. We took him to the hospitals. We looked for help everywhere, whatever we knew to do, we did.
Mm-hmm.
And so that's all you can hang on to, is that you did everything you need to do. And
Mm-hmm.
then also realize that your child has their own life. You have your life, they have their life.
Mm-hmm.
Whatever they choose and whatever path they walk, it is their path.
Mm-hmm.
Let them walk. And that's one of the things I didn't do very well, which in retrospect, I could have allowed myself to live my life a little bit better, take care of my health better, so that
Mm,
I'm not as sick as I was. Um, so you have to give your child the autonomy to live
mm,
their life. Let them live. You're there to support them, especially when they're adults. There's not very much you can do to stop them from whatever habits or whatever hang-ups they have. It's
mhm,
just you're there for guidance. Now, on this other side, which is devastating, I would never ever wish this on a parent, to lose your child, especially in those kinds of circumstances. It's so tough.
mm,
You just hold on to those memories and say, I did everything I knew to do.
mm,
I know my child left this world knowing that he is absolutely loved. There was no doubt in his mind that he was loved. And
mm,
not just by us, but because he tried very hard. He was very committed to the community and did all kinds of youth projects and all that. So
mm,
he came out of this life
mm.
with a lot of love. So that's what keeps us going. Now
Yeah.
you grieve. Today I'm not crying.
Mm,
Many days I cry.
yes.
Um, and it's okay. It's
Mhm,
supposed to be that way. It's very, very painful. And
yeah.
you just live through it.
Mm,
And the years now it's been 2 years. It's actually, we just celebrated his second anniversary just a little bit ago.
mm,
February the 19th was the
okay.
Sunday that he was found.
Mm,
And we just, as the years go by, you just tell yourself, this is permanent. He's not coming back. He's
mm,
permanent. And allow yourself to absorb what that means.
mm.
Um, but you don't move on. You
Yeah.
move despite,
In
in
spite
spite
of.
of the fact,
Yeah.
yeah, and just live a new normal.
It becomes, yes, it becomes your new normal. That's the
Yeah,
actual time I was gonna use. It becomes your new normal.
yeah.
And I feel and I think that there's some desperation when you realize that there's nothing, like you're hopeless, like you're helpless as as a parent, and there's nothing you can do. And coming to that point where I'm thinking it's almost like a death of some sort, where you feel like, you
Mm-hmm,
know what, I am powerless in this situation. No
mm-hmm,
matter how hard I can stay up all night, but I am absolutely powerless.
mm-hmm,
I cannot tie down my child and, like lock them in a room. You know,
mm-hmm,
I just have to let go. I think letting go is so difficult, especially because this is a child you birthed. This is a child you loved,
mm-hmm,
you had dreams for. You saw him grow
mm-hmm,
up. He has a little brother that you would like to have a sibling, so
mm-hmm.
I can only imagine how difficult this was.
And for me, because I'm a Christian and because I truly trust the Lord, and I
Hmm.
truly know that He has us in His hands. There's an image before we started having problems with Johnny when he was in high school, before he started having those issues.
Hmm.
I remember praying for him, and I remember God kind of putting this in my heart. He showed me like the parking lot. If Johnny walked out of this apartment right now and into the parking lot,
Yes.
and a car came by speeding,
Yeah.
there's not a thing you could do.
Yes.
And I've never forgotten that image that came to my mind, because God was telling me, leave him in my hands.
Yeah.
I've got him.
Hmm.
And so, even with his last breath, I totally believe that he was in God's hands,
Mm.
and God, out of his mercy,
Mm.
took him and
Hmm.
healed him completely. My husband used to we used to pray this specific prayer. He used to say, heal him completely, save
Mm.
him completely,
Mm.
use him completely.
Mm.
And as hard as it was to see that didn't end up the way we were praying for it, I'm like, he is completely healed.
Hmm.
He is completely healed. Johnny is no longer suffering from mental illness. He's
Yeah.
no longer suffering from addiction. I'm no
Mm.
longer sitting here wondering, is he in hospital? Is he in jail? Where is he? On the
Yes.
streets. I know exactly where he is.
Hmm.
And that gives me peace. That
Mm.
gives me hope, because
Mm.
Johnny gave his life to the Lord. And
Mm.
so I'm just I couldn't live any other way. So I don't know how to help anybody who doesn't believe in the Lord
Okay, yes,
because
because
I don't
yes.
know how to give you that assurance. I have total assurance that my son is in heaven. And
Mm,
so, and that we're the ones who are going to follow him. So I don't know how to help somebody who doesn't believe that. And so my prayer would be that his this my life story, my life with my child, my life, everything that has been through will point right back to God. That
mm,
God is the author of my life. He's
yeah,
the one who has orchestrated this life as it has been,
mm,
and that I'm still here because there's not a reason why I'm here other than to just glorify his name and to use a portion of my life a little bit to
mm-hmm,
expand his kingdom. And so my prayer would be that people just don't watch this as entertainment, as an interesting story, but as
mm,
a way that God actually works in the lives of his people, and
yeah,
that this would give somebody an appetite to know this Lord that we
mm,
know, and,
yes,
and accept him, because I
and,
don't know how you can live this life without him.
mm-hmm. Yeah, Miriam. I'm just thinking the importance. That was a question I was going to ask you. The
Hmm.
importance of faith, but you've answered it. That that faith is very important in this journey, and especially if you're a Bible believing Christian, faith is very important. And I thank God because He gives us grace, He gives us mercy, He gives us strength. You know, the Bible says the joy of the Lord is our strength, but also that He gives us peace
Hmm.
beyond human understanding.
Yes.
Somebody who is not in God, in Christ, will not understand how you're able to go on, you
Hmm.
know. But you know that you're able to go on because your strength is not drawn from your husband or your medication or whatever. Those are just supplements. But
Yes.
your main source of strength is Christ. And
Amen.
that's a beautiful thing to see. I want to take you back a little bit because you mentioned something and I wrote it down because I did
Okay.
want this to go and I want us to touch on this. You said that you realized that you might have been depressed even as a child. Can you please expound on that?
Yes. When I now go to counseling and we talk about my past, I
Mm-hmm.
remember actually being suicidal when I was 10 or 11. Now, would I have called it that? No, but I remember thinking I want my life to end and I was looking for something to end my life.
Okay.
That
Wow.
realization that I could have been depressed that young
Mm,
also, I think, helps me in the sense that depression is a chemical imbalance in the brain.
mm-hmm.
So when you have chronic depression, situations bring it out,
Yes.
but there is definitely something wrong. Just like the way somebody who has hypertension
Yes.
or has diabetes, it
Mm-hmm.
is something that is not working right in their system. And so
Yes.
you need treatment for that.
Yes.
Um, it frees me
Mm,
to know that it's just something that's off in my brain. And for me, I probably need medication for the rest of my life. That's
mm,
okay.
mm-hmm.
That's okay.
Mm-hmm. Do you remember what made you want to have suicidal ideation at 10?
That that whole sibling rivalry thing,
Okay.
which is not, when you think about it, that's nothing to put you
Be
in that
suicidal
kind of
about, yes.
state.
So
Yeah.
that
So
is clear. Mm-hmm.
mhm.
Yeah, yeah. Yes, it's true that sometimes the imbalance starts very early on and we just need a trigger. And
Yes.
as you said, it's not like you are in treatment. And for you, maybe as a child, treatment would not have been medication. Maybe it would have been psychotherapy, and then that would have helped you deal well. Just like when you have diabetes,
Hmm.
and the doctor tells you need to change your diet, you need to lose weight, you need to eat healthy, and you start doing those things, then you don't have to take the medication anymore.
Yeah.
But you have to do those things. But for you, you did not know all along that this was something. It just happened that you were triggered, something triggered it, and then it came on full fledged. Ooh, okay, this has been a heavy, heavy story.
Yeah.
But I thank God for Miriam's life because Miriam has a wonderful husband who's been very supportive. I want us to talk a little bit about him.
Oh
And
man, he doesn't like that at all.
okay, and okay, you don't have to talk about him. Then
He says, keep me out of all your shenanigans. I don't want to be. You can do your whole media thing, but please keep me out of it.
okay, so keep him out of it, but tell us how your life is. Tell us your story, your life now.
Oh, it is what I thought marriage should be.
Okay.
Supportive of each other. We
Mm-hmm.
enjoy each other. We're friends. We
Mm-hmm.
can talk for hours
Mm-hmm.
together. Um, and I think for us, because we love the Lord, we also know that He's orchestrating our lives. So even in the very worst devastation of our lives, I don't think there's anything as hard as losing a child.
Yes.
I really don't, to be honest. If there is, I haven't experienced it and I hope never to.
Yes.
There's something uniquely difficult about losing your child.
Mm-hmm.
And because my husband, although he's not his biological father,
Mm-hmm.
I'll tell you a quick, sweet story.
Mm-hmm.
My son, Johnny, had said he'd never call anybody else dad. And we
Mm-hmm.
were okay with it. We said, it's all right. And so he would try to figure out what to call him. He was like, you just call me by my name. That's okay.
Mm-hmm.
Which he wouldn't, because my my husband is pastor. People
Mm-hmm.
call him Pastor Gerald. So sometimes he would just call him Pastor Gerald, or
Mm-hmm.
sometimes he would call him Fafa for
Mm-hmm.
father in Kikuyu.
Mm-hmm.
But then he most of the time wouldn't really address him as anything. But in that period of time when he was much better,
Mm-hmm.
that last in 2022, he started to call him dad.
Mm-hmm.
Just out of the blue, he just referred to him as dad. And so he was very much his dad. And he would even say, my son has his last words on Facebook, because he was on Facebook, he talked about how he would love to be the kind of man that his dad
Oh,
is, talking
oh,
about my husband. So he's been the example for our children. He's
mm,
been the absolute rock for me. But it also really devastated him. I had to switch from worrying about me and myself and my illness to switch back to him when Johnny passed, because it really took a toll on him.
mm,
So it's that taking care of each other,
mm,
taking care of each other's needs. We have to be kind to each other, put
mhm.
each other's needs first. So it's been a great journey,
Good.
and we hope to keep going on. We're going to be celebrating 9 years in
Oh,
July.
nice. Congratulations.
Yeah, thank
Congratulations.
you. Thank
Now,
you.
this is a happy, happy, happy point, and I want to end it here. Happily.
Okay.
Miriam, I am so grateful. Thank you so much for taking
Oh,
time to share your story in the beginning and again coming back today and sharing your story with us. Thank you so much. God bless you. And we will put your information in the video so that those who want to get in touch with you can get in touch with you. But also, we'll put information about suicide and addiction help so that anybody who needs help can get help. Thank you
mhm.
so much for being with us, Miriam. Until next time, this is Dolly from Kavaya's Daughter Speaks.